Alright, I'm trying something here, something different, something new. Hopefully it'll help some of you guys out with what's going on in class. If it works this time, we're going to try it some more. Recording these PowerPoints without me having to get up there in front of the class and talk to everybody. Let you do a little bit at your own pace. So hopefully this works out, and we can do it again later on in the year. So this one we're dealing with is the powers of Congress. We're finishing up Article 1 of the Constitution, talking about some of the things that Congress can and cannot do based on what the Constitution says. So the main thing that Congress is able to do, you can see right here, is make laws. Day in and day out, that's what members of the House and members of the Senate are doing on a daily basis. Any law that is created comes from Congress, from one house or the other. The president gets a lot of blame for some of the laws that are passed, some of the things that occur, but when it all comes down to it, it's Congress that is making these laws up. The president might have the idea for what the law should be about. He might sign it off in the law. Who comes up with the of what that law is going to be. So when you think of Congress, when you think of the legislative branch, you got to think about them making laws. That is their main job, making laws. So when you look at the Capitol building right down here, for those going to D.C., we'll go into that building. When they're there, that's their main thing. They are making laws for our country. Good laws, bad laws, doesn't matter what your opinion is, that's their main job, is to make laws. So legislative branch, they make laws. Some of the things that they're able to do are called expressed powers. If it's an express power, what that means is that it is specifically listed within the Constitution. So if you read the document, you're going to find what these things are. You're going to be able to read them, you're going to be able to see them. Those are things that they can do. They are expressed. Just like if you express yourself, it's out there. People know it. They don't have to guess what that thing is, whatever it is expressed, just like what these powers are. These are things that you're going to know Congress is able to do based on what the Constitution says. So some of those things are the power to tax. Okay, Congress has the power to tax the states, it has the power to raise taxes, it has the power to lower taxes, it has the power to tax. This is something that within the Articles, Congress couldn't do. They had zero power to tax. They could request for funds to be sent into the government, but they couldn't tax you. They couldn't make you pay your taxes. Under the Constitution, that's something Congress is able to do. All right, they have the power to tax. They have the power to demand or require that states, individuals, pay their taxes. All right. They have the power to borrow money. That could be borrowing money from individuals within the United States, which has happened before. Very wealthy individuals have lent money to our government, but mostly it comes from overseas, another country lending us money. Nowadays, basically, so we can run our day-to-day operations as a country. We got that 15 plus trillion, it might be 16 plus trillion, it might be more, I don't know the exact number at the moment, but we borrow money right now to run our day-to-day operations. We don't have enough money coming in through taxes to pay for it, so we got to borrow it from somebody else. So every day that amount goes up, and it's Congress who is doing that borrowing. Congress could also say that they no longer want to borrow money or don't want to borrow as much money. That's their decision, right? So Congress has the power to borrow money. States can't borrow money from other countries, and that's just the way it is. So power to borrow money. They have the power to regulate trade or the selling of goods. They have the power to regulate commerce, basically. Trade between the states, trade between the U.S. and another country. If there are disputes that rise amongst the states, Congress can come in there and they can kind of sort things out. So that's their job in regards to trade and selling things, mostly between states, not necessarily between the U.S. and other countries, but they do have that power as well. And they also have the power to print money, print currency. States no longer print money. That was an issue with the Articles of Confederation. Under the Articles, Congress also had the power to print currency, but the states had that power as well. under the Constitution, it's only Congress. It's only the federal government. States cannot print money for their individual state. So we don't have 50 different dollar bills floating around. We don't have 50 different $20 bills. It's one national currency that Congress is in control of. If they want to print more money, that's their call. If they want to start printing less money, that's their call as well. So the power to print, to decide how much is being printed, that's all a power that's given to Congress through the Constitution. So these 4 powers right here, power to tax, borrow money, regulate trade, print money, those are expressed within the Constitution. If you read that document, those are things you are going to see within the Constitution itself. Okay, they are expressed. They are specifically in that document. All right, so everyone knows. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. These are things that people know Congress can do. All right, so there's really no argument in regards to these powers right here. Right? If it's in the Constitution, that's the way it is. There's another type of power, though, Congress has, and we call that the implied powers. If something's implied, it's not written down. People might get confused about it. They might not know the ins and outs. One person might have one opinion on it, and the other person might have a different opinion on what it means. So if it's implied, it's not specifically written down. It's something that is brought up, that people start to say, oh yeah, Congress should have that power, or Congress needs to have that power, and that's what these things are. These are things not written down. They're suggested. They're things that Congress probably should be able to do, but they're not specifically written down within the Constitution. So if it's implied, it's not written, but it's something that Congress should be able to do within our country. All right, this is also called the necessary and proper clause. People call it this because they figure these powers or these things that Congress do are around because they're necessary and they're needed in order to make the country run properly. So necessary and proper clause is what some folks call them. We're going to call these powers the elastic clause. All right, elastic meaning that when it comes down to it, the Constitution can kind of be bent and flexed and stretched, and the shape can be changed to make it work around whatever Congress needs it to do. All right, so it might not be specifically written within the Constitution, but because of the implied powers, because of the elastic clause, Congress is still able to do it, and they can always throw this out there. All right, the arguments always come up. Well, Congress doesn't have the power to do whatever the thing is, but a congressman or Congress itself will come out and say, well, due to the elastic clause, we're able to do this. The country needs us to do this, so we're going to do it anyway. All right, so these are things that Congress can do in order to conduct business, in order to make sure the country is running properly. Things that might not be written down, but Congress will come out and say, well, we need to do this because without it, our country's going to be in bad shape. Our country's not going to be able to function properly, and that's going to be a bad thing no matter what. So even though it's not written down, we're doing this so our country functions. Okay, without some of the things that Congress does with the implied powers here, our country might be in a pretty rough spot or a pretty bad shape. So if it's implied, it's not written down, but Congress is going to do it to make sure our country functions and runs properly and accordingly. Right? We call that the elastic clause. So we have expressed powers, and then we have implied powers. We're gonna call the implied powers the elastic clause. All right. So some of the examples of these implied powers are right here. So these are things that Congress did not have the power to do, but they made these things, or they created these things to make sure that the country functions properly. Establishing a Federal Reserve. That's an organization that handles the country's money. All right. Without this organization, the country might be in pretty tough shape monetarily in regards to inflation or printing money and things of that nature. Congress has the power to print money, but the Federal Reserve is in charge of printing that money. All right, so Congress created this organization, created this this branch of the government to deal with monetary issues. All right, they made tax evasion a crime. All right, so they can require people to pay taxes, but it necessarily wasn't a crime to not pay your taxes. So Congress came out and said, well, now we're making it a law that if you do not pay your taxes, you're going to be punished for it. So that's all tax evasion is. If you don't pay your taxes, you are evading your taxes. So tax evasion is a crime due to the implied powers that Congress created. All right, any federal aid program, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all these things were created by Congress in order to help out people that were retired or elderly, or to help out people that were in need of medical care. Welfare will be another example of this. So these are things that aren't in the Constitution. All right, nothing about welfare or Social Security is in the Constitution. Congress took it upon itself to create these programs in order to help the country out, help out those that needed that assistance. So creating federal aid programs or any other federal aid program that comes about, the Affordable Care Act, we call it Obamacare. That's something that Congress created. It wasn't given the power in the Constitution, but it's implied that they're able to do these things. Drafting an army. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that Congress can draft an army or force people to enlist into the army. So this is something that they created. It really started during the Civil War. It happened during the Second World War. Happened again during the Vietnam War. Since then, there's not been a draft. But if Congress deems it necessary, they have the power to draft an army. Right? If they need more able-bodied citizens to fight in a war, they can say, all right, we're instituting a draft, and that's the way it's going to be. So that's an implied power. If we need to fight, if we need men to fight, if we need more men to be able to fight and win a war, they're going to draft enough men to go and fight in that war. And then the bottom one there is setting minimum wages and maximum work hours. Again, you're not going to find any of that stuff within the Constitution. Excuse me. But Congress can set what that minimum wage is going to be, and that's something that more recently they've talked about, increasing minimum wage around $10. I know when I started working, minimum wage was $5.15. So they're doubling minimum wage. It's been about 15, 16 years since I started working. So now they want to double minimum wage, and that's Congress's job to do that. If they want to set a national minimum wage, they're able to do that. States can also set a minimum wage for their state, but they have to follow the national minimum wage. You can't be below what the federal government sets. So if it's $10 an hour, every state has to be at least $10 an hour. Right? Some states are a little more than what the minimum wage is now, and that's okay. Maximum work hours, usually 40 hours a week, is considered a full-time job. I'm not sure exactly what the maximum work hours are. Some people I know work 60 hours. Some people might work 80 hours a week. But if they ever come out and say, well, no one can work over 40 hours a week, that's something that Congress can do. Again, these are implied. You're not going to find these things written down in the Constitution, but they're things that Congress is going to be able to do in order to make sure that the country functions properly. The big ones I'm thinking about are drafting an army, if we need defense, and establishing federal aid programs for those that might need a little more assistance, for them to get back on their feet, or for those people to actually survive in our country today. So these are implied, not in the Constitution, but Congress has the power to create these things or make these things based on the elastic clause or these implied powers. Impeachment. We talked about impeachment a little bit. Need a drink. Talked about a little bit about impeachment with different assignments that we've worked on so far. So impeachment basically just means the end result would be removing a government official from office. Usually we're talking about presidents here. We could be talking about congressmen. We could be talking about Supreme Court justices, but usually we're talking about impeaching presidents. The impeaching in general is just bringing up the crime, whatever that crime is. All right. So it goes from bringing up the crime that person committed, and then the second part of it would be hearing that case, the trial that takes place to find whether or not that person is guilty or innocent. If they're guilty, they're going to be removed from office. If they're found innocent, then they're going to remain in their position. There have been 2 times that a president has been impeached, and all that means is that they've had crimes brought against them when they've been in office. So it's the House of Representatives that does the impeaching, okay? So they're the ones that call the trial. They're the ones that say, this individual committed a crime, they need to be put on trial. They need to be impeached, okay? So they're the ones that bring up those charges. The House of Representatives, the 435 members of the House, they vote, and if they get the amount needed, I'm not sure exactly what that number is, if they get the amount needed in order to impeach an individual or impeach an official, then it goes on to the trial phase. So the House is the one that does the impeaching. They're the ones that bring up the charges. The Senate then conducts the trial. So the Senate acts as the jury for that trial. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court will come in. He'll be the main judge in that trial, and then the Senate will be the jury. So it'll be just like any other trial. There'll be some witnesses. There'll be testimonies. There'll be a defense. There'll be a prosecution. And the main goal is to see whether or not this person committed the crime that they're being charged with, and if that crime is warranted to have them removed from office. 2 times the president has been impeached. That means that the House has brought up charges and they've been put on trial. First one was Andrew Johnson back in the late 1860s. Andrew Johnson was doing things that were favorable to the South after the Civil War. The Northerners who didn't like the South thought that he was being too sympathetic, and they said that he was harming the country based on what he was doing, and these are things that we'll talk later about. So they wanted him impeached. They wanted him kicked out of office. Once the Senate had heard the charges, they went through the trial process. They said the things that Andrew Johnson was doing, not impeachable. All right, so we're not going to kick him out of office for what he did. The second time this happened, I was in high school, 1996-ish was when it took place, and that was President Bill Clinton. He was put on trial for lying under oath. Members of the House, which were mostly Republican, said that he lied under oath when he was put on oath for some scandal that he was involved in. And they said that was against the law. Can't do it, which it is against the law. You can't lie while you're under oath in a court. So he was impeached. They got the necessary votes and went to trial in the Senate. And the Senate again said, not enough here. We're not going to kick this guy out of office for what you're telling him or what you're charging him of. So those are the 2 times that a president has been impeached. And those are really the only times that impeachment has been brought up within our country. One other time, really, Richard Nixon was involved in a scandal where he was involved in spying, basically, on his opponents in an election while he was president. Recordings, wiretappings, people that he knew of breaking into files and whatnot in his opponent's offices. He resigned before he was able to be impeached. Had he been impeached, more than likely he would have been found guilty and he would have been kicked out of office. But he resigned before that happened. So the big thing here, impeaching, the end game is removal from office. The House does the impeaching. Okay, they're the ones that call for the impeachment. And then the Senate, they're the ones that try the impeachment case. They're the ones that find guilt or innocent, and they say whether or not you're going to be kicked out of office or you're going to stay in office. Okay, so that's really the ins and outs of impeachment. Congress does the impeaching. The House calls for the impeachment, and the Senate hears the trial. Just like there's things that Congress can do, there's certain things that Congress cannot do. The Constitution says Congress cannot do these certain things. They have the power. They do not have the power to do these things. Most of them were brought up because over in England, or when the colonies were part of England, these things had taken place either in England or in the colonies, and the founding fathers didn't want those things taking place within the United States. So in the Constitution, these are things that Congress cannot do. by law. So the first one is they cannot suspend what's called the writ of habeas corpus. Okay, these are Latin terms for the most part, and I'm going to tell you what they mean here. So what it means is that when a person is arrested, they can't just be put in jail without being told why they're being arrested. So if someone is arrested, the police or whoever's doing the arresting has to say, you're being arrested for speeding or drug possession or disorderly conduct. So whatever it is you are being put in prison for or being arrested for, they have to tell you what that is. If they suspend habeas corpus, okay, if they suspend the writ of habeas corpus, if they make this happen, that just means that they can arrest people for whatever and put them in jail and not tell them why they're being there, why they're being put there. Things like that had happened with the king and with Parliament, so our founding fathers didn't want that to happen within our government. So Congress cannot suspend the writ of habeas corpus. They cannot detain somebody without telling the person why they're being detained, right? So if you're being arrested, they have to tell you why you're being arrested. And that's what a writ of habeas corpus is, telling you why you're being arrested. Congress cannot pass ex post facto laws. Ex post facto laws, I like to call them after the fact laws. What an ex post facto law is that they can't punish you or arrest you for a crime that you committed before it was a crime. Alright, so the example I usually give in class is if you climb a tree today, right, if you're outside and you climb a tree today, and then tomorrow they say climbing trees is illegal, they can't go and arrest you for climbing the tree before it was a law, before it was made illegal. So if you climb the tree today, not illegal, they make it a law tomorrow, which makes it illegal, they can't arrest you for what you did the day before. Alright? So they can't arrest you retroactively. Okay, they can't, if you do something before it was made illegal, then they can't arrest you for it. So after the fact laws, they cannot arrest you after the fact. Right? So this punishes an act that was not illegal when it was committed. Climbing a tree wasn't illegal today, so they cannot arrest you today if they make it illegal tomorrow. Alright, so no ex post facto law. They cannot pass what's called bills of attainder. And what this means is saying that you're guilty without giving you a trial. Okay, you need to have a trial in order to be found guilty. Every individual, no matter what, is guaranteed a trial if they commit a crime. It could be the most obvious crime in the world, but they cannot say you're guilty unless they give you a trial. So bills of attainder just mean that you are guaranteed a trial. No matter what crime you commit, you're guaranteed a trial. And then the last one, Congress cannot grant titles of nobility. We don't live in a country with a government that has kings and queens and princes and dukes and archdukes and all that stuff. So Congress cannot grant anybody a title of nobility. We don't have any of those things within the United States. That's something, again, that is listed in the Constitution. You can read it, you can see it. Excuse me. So Congress cannot do it. So these are things Congress is unable to do within Congress or within the Constitution. It explains these things. Congress cannot pass writs of habeas corpus. They can't arrest you without giving you a reason. They can't pass ex post facto laws, which means they can't punish you for something that you did before it was illegal. They can't pass bills of attainder, which means that you are found guilty before you even have a trial. They got to give you a trial, and they cannot grant titles of nobility. They can't make somebody a prince, a princess, a duke, or whatever that title is. We don't have those things within our country, so they're not able to do that. All right, so these are things Congress can't do. Things previously are the powers that Congress has. Express powers that are actually written down in the Constitution. Implied powers, or the elastic clause, are things that aren't written down, what Congress is going to do to make sure our country functions properly. Powers not given to Congress